Hello Pioneers, how are you doing today? So, if you've read the title, today is going to be just like a showcase of the photo mode and how it works. And for the purpose of today's video, I've turned down the factory volume to 25%, just so that it is not in the way of my voice. So yeah. With all that being said, I think we should be going on to the video so that we can teach you how to use the camera system effectively and make some cool cinematic shots. Okay, so for the first part, I'm just going to be showcasing this little mode here, which we have some items going in the background. It's all blurry, and the Pioneer, which is me, is in focus. This can be done in two different ways. The way I did it was closing the aperture and having a automatic aperture distance thing, which helped out a decent bit because it meant that it would focus on the Pioneer, or what I was pointing at, which was the Pioneer, which allowed me to create this shot. You could also do it with the manual mode where you where you manually have to change the focus distance, which is a little bit harder because it wouldn't focus the entire Pioneer. Like, either the hover pack in the back wasn't focused in, or the leg in the front wasn't focused in. So that had to be fixed, and automatic was amazing for that. So, the place where I did that was obviously third floor. That was a pre-recorded clip, which I will voice over in post. Over at the computer factory, specifically over here, which is not actually building computers, but building the electronic circuits for computers. But there will be another clip, sorry for that, later, where I do showcase a little editing over here. But yeah, so I actually did the whole thing here, and I can probably explain it for you again. But obviously the lighting was done with this mod called Sky UI, which basically lets me manipulate the time, so I can make it later for that nice slightly dark but not too dark effect, and then even make it lighter like I do for videos. And what I actually did was kind of like position myself here, press P for photo mode, then R for the decoupled camera, and then you press tab for the settings, and okay, so, and then zoom in to your desired zoom, then you go to the camera, then you lower the aperture enough to make the whole thing blurry, and then you autofocus. Did I auto or did I manual? Give me a second. Well, let me go back to autofocus. So oh wait, let me change the pose. I think the pose also has something to do with it. Let me find the right one. Oh, also pose is another important thing. I think I'm gonna have to increase the aperture a little bit. So yeah, it's a fine balance between aperture, focus, and even positioning. So with positioning, there's a couple poses. You can even hide the Pioneer, Ooh, that's interesting. I'm gonna play around with this a little bit. So there's also the nudge, which allows you to move your character if it's not in the right position. Yeah, I've never played with some of these tools, but yeah, those can come in important if if you don't want to like exit photo mode to reposition the Pioneer. You can just fiddle with these to put the Pioneer in the right place. But with camera, there's decoupled and standard, which standard puts you on the Pioneer, decoupled lets you look at the Pioneer, and there's autofocus and manual focus, which are both tools for when you're dealing with aperture that's lower than, I believe, 24. So when you lower that aperture, it's good to find the perfect balance between foggy and not foggy, because you can see there's like a little bit of foggy back there, and then it's perfectly clear right here. Then there's also roll, which lets you tilt your cameras, or your camera, which can come in handy if you're trying to get more interesting angles, such as this. But another thing, press X if you want to reset a single thing, and then just click the reset if you want everything to be set back to default. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is the image tab, which holds exposure, saturation, contrast, and tint. All of which are interesting settings. But yeah, so tint, you can't really see it because it doesn't have like a color scale. It would be cool if they had a color scale on tint. And then there's intensity, which if you put 0 intensity, tint is not going to change, period. And then there's color filters, which there's a whole scale of color filters if you don't want to mess with tint. Mercer is an interesting one because depending on what effect filter, which we'll get to later, it has some different effects. And Stark is basically black and white. Vice is an interesting one that I have not played around with much. Orange and purple. Orange and purple is actually a pretty good one that comes in handy whenever you're using poster. Or was it poster or was it... It's some... Give me a second. I think it was poster. Yeah, poster, and then... I think we're not in, like, the right color thing, though. But yeah, so those are all filters, and there's even a dolly, which... Just a quick example. You can set the speed of the dolly, so if you want it to be fast, it goes back and forth real quickly. If you want to be slow, as you see here, it's not moving too fast. And there's also tracking points, which tracking points is with like aperture. So the tracking point is now set to there, and you can see it kind of changes with the stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna cut to another clip real quickly that shows off like transitioning, using some transition magic to showcase like a shot of this area, and then we'll get into how you can make your own shots after that. So as you may or may not have seen in that clip, the transition was very smooth, and that's not something super easy. I'm just going to say that. You have to find like a good spot in the clip that you want to get it aligned, and that's not always an easy thing to do. For me, my reference point, because both clips were like on the same full like movement of axis, I used this where this corner clipped out the frame as a reference point, which actually let me get a really nice looking shot. Unfortunately, because the computers weren't like paused or even like in a straight line like you see here, you could see that was an obvious like video cut because the placement of the computers changed between frames. But if you have like either a static or a steady moving shot, these won't really change from clip to clip. And whenever you're doing like one of those clips where you're definitely gonna be changing your image settings, always keep the same dolly. So let's quickly set a start point and then run over here for endpoint, and then make sure that we're still aligned on the center line, looking that way, set endpoint. So if we go back to the beginning of that, this one pans up a little bit, and then it's gonna stop and then go back. It's good to keep the same like settings between your so it's gonna slow. It's good to keep the same like dolly settings, and even maybe slow it down a teeny bit like that, and then it'll just go back and forth between those 2 points. And between the back and forth you can switch it. So like when it stops there, I can switch it to poster. And you can even have like a color filter also in that. Hold on. Let me find a good one. Like that. That looks pretty cool. So basically transition between this and this. Or even as I used that, which looks pretty cool. In one of my previous videos, I did use this, like, half of the screen was Neuer and Mercer, so let me get to that, which makes a really, really nice purple, like that. This is a beautiful, like, color scheme here, and then I just used standard. But I will say, Neuer and Mercer fit together perfectly. Then there's also these other settings down here, which bloom has to do. Let me stop the dolly. So if I go back into photo mode, if you look at these lights here, bloom has everything to do with the lighting, like artificial lights. So if I turn the bloom up, you'll slowly see that the lights get like more vibrant, and then when I turn it down, the lights become less vibrant. If I switch to a different setting, perhaps let's do this one. If I turn up bloom, that becomes very bright at 100%, and then aberration is like splitting the color scheme. This has its uses. Like if you do it very slightly, it can look cool. It's like one of those state-to-state things, in my opinion. I mean, you can probably do a dolly setting with it, right? If I aberrate this fully and set the endpoint there. No. Blend camera settings. And then turn this. So, yeah. Not yet. There isn't like a setting thing yet. I think maybe in a different update they could add it where like you can change this, like the dolly points also are with the filters. By like the slider filters, not the actual effect filters themselves, because I feel like the effect filters would be too hard to do. But yeah, so aberration, it just splits the colors into the RGB values, and then vignette just makes it darker. So if you want to have like a darker themed, or like make it look a little darker. And then grain, at current, grain doesn't seem to do much. Like I'm moving the slider back and forth. I could try different. Yeah, I'm not seeing much. Yeah, grain doesn't exist on some of the settings though, which is interesting. I don't even exactly know what grain does. It's just kind of there. But yeah, so bloom, lights, aberration, RGB, vignette, make it dark. But yeah, at current, the dolly does not, or at least to my knowledge, the dolly does not like actually. The dolly does not have anything set up to like change the bloom. I wonder what this looks like. That looks cool. So like a combination of vignette and bloom together, you can create something cool like this where it's like shining in the dark. And on VHS, I think that's a good bit of vignette. And bloom, I feel like bloom is something that excels specifically for VHS, because in most VHS like style videos I've seen, it's just like kind of like this with blown out lights. Like the lights are extremely bright when you move around. And bloom even affects the lights that are on conveyor belts too. But yeah. Exiting photo mode, everything looks normal. But yeah, photo mode is one of those things for cinematic shots. Cinematics, yeah. Because it can help especially if you're making content, which I'm gonna try to incorporate more of like both dolly settings and image settings into my videos and builds. So stay tuned for the next video where we will begin to work solely on the frames, because we've completed the computer setup and we have a small excess of computers. So hope you guys all enjoyed, and if you found this guide interesting and maybe even useful, hit that subscribe button, share to anybody who also is experimenting with these settings, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.